Sarah Hayes pulled her coat tighter against the bitter Ohio wind as she left the frozen food factory at 6 a.m., her breath forming small clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. At 25, she'd been working these brutal night shifts for 3 years, ever since her father's sudden heart attack had left the family drowning in mortgage payments and medical debt. While her siblings had scattered across the country pursuing their dreams, Sarah had stayed in Riverton, sacrificing her own aspirations to keep the family home from foreclosure. The work was hard, monotonous, and bone-chilling. She stood for 10 hours at a time in sub-zero temperatures, packaging frozen vegetables while her fingers went numb despite the thick gloves. Her supervisor role on the line meant she was responsible for quality control and managing a small team. But to most of the world, she was just another factory worker. To her mother, she was something far worse, an embarrassment.
Margaret Hayes had always been obsessed with appearances. In their upper-middle-class neighborhood, status was currency, and Margaret collected her children's achievements like trophies to display at book club meetings and charity luncheons. There was David, the cardiologist practicing in Boston, Jessica, the creative director at a prestigious New York advertising agency, and Lily, the promising law student at Georgetown. Then there was Sarah, the daughter who wore a hairnet and smelled like freezer burn. "I just don't understand why you can't do better," her mother would say, her voice dripping with disappointment whenever Sarah came home too exhausted to hide the weariness in her eyes. "Your siblings all made something of themselves. David saves lives. Jessica wins awards. Even Lily is on law review. And you pack frozen peas." Sarah had learned to let the words wash over her, to remind herself why she was doing this. Someone had to keep the lights on. Someone had to make sure her mother could stay in the house she'd shared with Dad for 30 years. But knowing the reason didn't make the criticism hurt any less, especially when it came in front of others. At family dinners, Margaret would steer conversations away from Sarah's life entirely, as if by not acknowledging her work, she could pretend it didn't exist. When neighbors asked about her children, Margaret would spend 20 minutes detailing David's latest research paper or Jessica's recent campaign for a major brand, then add Sarah as an afterthought. And Sarah's figuring things out. The phrase stung every time, as if at 25, working full-time and paying the mortgage, Sarah was still just a child playing at adulthood. The breaking point came on Mother's Day, a Sunday that should have been ordinary. Sarah had requested the day off weeks in advance, planning to take her mother to brunch at the tea room she loved downtown. She'd even saved up to buy her a beautiful silk scarf she'd been admiring. But when she checked her phone that morning, she found a group text that made her blood run cold. "Dinner at the Riverside Room, 6 p.m., her mother had written to a group chat that included David, Jessica, and Lily. "So proud to celebrate with my successful kids. Can't wait to hear about all your accomplishments." Sarah read the message 3 times, then checked the recipient list again. Her name wasn't there. Her mother had created a separate group chat specifically to exclude her. Her hands shook as she scrolled up through her message history with her mother. The last text was from 3 days ago, Sarah asking if she needed anything from the store. Before that, a week earlier, Sarah letting her know she'd paid the mortgage. Her mother had responded to neither, but she'd found time to coordinate a family dinner that Sarah wasn't invited to celebrate children she deemed worthy of her pride. Something cracked open inside Sarah's chest, not her heart breaking, but something harder. A shell of obligation and guilt that had kept her tethered to people who saw her as less than. She thought about her father, about how he'd always told her that honest work had its own dignity. He'd been a high school teacher, not wealthy or prestigious, but he'd loved what he did and who he was. He would have been ashamed of what Margaret had become, of what she was doing to their daughter. Sarah made her decision in that moment, standing in her small apartment that she could barely afford because she was paying her mother's mortgage instead. She blocked her mother's number, Then she blocked David's, Jessica's, and Lily's too. She sent one final message to the family group chat before leaving it. I hope you all enjoy your celebration of success. I've realized I've been measuring myself by the wrong metrics. I'm choosing to invest in people who actually value me. Then she disappeared. Not physically. She stayed in Riverton, kept her job, kept her apartment, but she vanished from her family's life completely, and the silence was deafening. For the first few weeks, there were attempts to reach her through work, through old friends, through social media she'd already deleted. Her mother left voicemails on the factory's main line, not apologetic, but indignant. How dare you embarrass me like this, after everything I've done for you? As if the guilt should bring Sarah crawling back. But Sarah didn't crawl. She walked forward. Without the weight of her mother's mortgage, she could finally breathe. She picked up technical courses at the community college, studying refrigeration systems and industrial management. Her supervisor noticed her initiative and recommended her for additional training. Within a year, she'd been promoted to line supervisor with a significant raise. Within 2 years, she was assistant operations manager. The work still wasn't glamorous, but Sarah found she was good at it. She understood the machinery, the logistics, the people. She made the factory floor safer and more efficient. She mentored younger workers who reminded her of herself, people working hard jobs to support families who didn't always appreciate the sacrifice. She started to build something that was entirely her own. On quiet evenings, she began writing. At first, it was just therapy, processing her feelings about her mother, about classism, about the way society devalued certain kinds of work. But as she wrote, she found her voice sharpening into something clear and powerful. She started an anonymous blog called Blue Collar Daughter, writing about her experiences with toxic family dynamics and the dignity of honest work. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people found her words and saw themselves reflected back. People who'd been told their work wasn't good enough, that they weren't good enough, simply because they didn't have the right kind of job or degree. Sarah wrote about the factory workers who were supporting families, pursuing education, creating art, volunteering in their communities, full, rich lives that were invisible to people who only valued certain narrow definitions of success. Her readership grew. She wrote about the Mother's Day text, about being excluded from her own family, about choosing to walk away. The post went viral, shared thousands of times across social media. People debated it in think pieces and comment sections. Some called her selfish for abandoning her mother. Others praised her courage. Sarah didn't read the comments much. She knew her truth. What she didn't know was that her blog had reached Riverton's social circles, including the book club and charity luncheon crowd her mother frequented. Women began sharing the posts, not knowing they were reading about Margaret Hayes' own daughter. They discussed the themes at their meetings. How terrible for that poor girl. Can you imagine a mother treating her child that way? Margaret, who'd spent years curating her image as the perfect mother of successful children,